What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Big Five Pod, episode number 89. Cope, we are creeping up toward 100. This is kind of crazy. Um, yeah, we're happy to be here. I'm, of course, Kyle Morello, co-host next to me, Jake Copestick. Cope, we took a week off, not a whole lot going on. We got some more stuff to talk about this time, though. But first of all, how we doing?
Yeah, we're doing well. It's been a while. Hopefully nobody forgot about us.
Hopefully
Um,
not.
but yeah, I'm doing well. Summer's in full effect. It was at Kenny Chesney last weekend. Had a good time.
Nice.
Summer's really good. Baseball's on. Wish the Stanley Cup and the NBA Finals were a little more entertaining than they were. But regardless, like summer's great. No matter how you slice it, summer's great. It's been hot, but the weather's been nice. Yeah, hard to be doing bad when it's this nice out.
Yeah. Weather's been beautiful. I'm definitely still mourning the Rangers. Speaking of the Stanley Cup, listen, it's gonna end up being that the Rangers were the second best team in the NHL this year, and that's very hard to swallow when we played the team that's first. And yeah, that stinks, but that's sports for you. So yeah. Before we start, definitely have to show off my new jersey. Cope, I got this at a thrift store in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I showed you this. Uh, you see Kings. Now, obviously, you'd be like, Kyle, you're a Knicks fan. Why are you wearing a Kings jersey? Well, I respect the game. Because look at the back. Jimmer. It's a Jimmer jersey. It doesn't even say Fredette on it. It says Jimmer. I saw it at a thrift store. It's like, I have to. I have to. So I had to show it off on the pod. So shout out to Jimmer Fredette. Obviously one of the college basketball goats. And one of the CBA goats too out there in China. He's performed out there for many years. And I think he will be on the 3v3 USA Olympic basketball team this year for the Olympics next month. So shout out to Jimmer. He's a goat. All right, Cope. With that being said, we got some stuff to get into. Obviously, we're going to start off here with Cope's quick hitters. So get that ball. We're going to run the break. What do you got?
So first, also Jimmer was a Nick at one point,
He
correct?
was a Nick at one point.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it I
So
guess
that does work. Yes. That
guess
does
it counts.
work. That
So a lot
counts.
going on with the NCAA. They announced recently, in addition to a salary cap being put on for the Power Five schools, well, I guess Power Four at this point with the death of the Pac-12, that all transfers that had to sit out a year prior to the 2019-2020 season, when the rule was when you transferred, you had to sit a year. When that was still in effect, you're going to be granted an extra year of eligibility. So one of the Boone twins, I think it's Keelan Boone, was at Oklahoma State, also played at UNLV. He had to sit with that rule. I believe he's going to try and take advantage, which I think would be a seventh year for him.
Oh my God.
So I don't really know how many people it affects because you would have had to be in college a long time already. And if you've transferred, like you've probably just most people I feel like have just taken the freedom of the transfer rule and just kind of gone wherever they want. That I feel like this hasn't been a problem. And most people have used up their eligibility at this point. But there still is a couple stragglers out there that um this could pertain to. So I thought that was important to knock out of the way because you might see a guy that plays a sixth or seventh year that you didn't think had it because out of nowhere he thought he was out of eligibility, and the NCAA is going to gift them back a year if they had to sit prior to the transfer portal era as we know it now. And then moving on, Kyle, I thought this was interesting. Report a couple days ago that the Big 12 was debating selling their naming rights to Allstate to be the All-State Big 12 Conference or the All-State 12 Conference. Now, obviously, a lot of money would be involved in this. You could potentially have All-State logos on the field. You'd have All-State logos on the score ticker, on the TV, maybe All-State logos, maybe on the back of helmets or on jerseys. So I texted you this morning while I was on the train going to work, and I said to you, come up with what you think would be a funny sponsorship for a conference. Could be anything, could be football, could be basketball. So do you have one for me before I give you my $1 billion idea?
First of all, very excited to hear your $1 billion idea. Just thinking of one. I know you'll laugh at this. How about the American Athletic Championships presented by Cracker Barrel? I
Do
know
you
you
just
love
you want the conference to go in the toilet? I mean, what
I
do
know
you
you love Cracker Barrel, so I figured you would appreciate that.
look, with most of the schools being down south, how about we do $1 million upgrade here and we call it the American Athletic Conference Championship presented by Waffle House?
Oh, that could also work.
A lot of
That could
schools
also
down
work.
south. You have a
Listen,
player in me if that's the case.
That wouldn't be a bad thing. I mean, there's just so many possible funny combinations that could come out of this. I mean, I first of all, before we even brainstorm any other names, I have to hear this $1 million idea. So tell the people, Cope, what is your funny conference sponsorship name that you've come up with?
Okay. So obviously the Pac-12 just died.
Yes.
So if we're going to revive it, you don't need to bring back the original, member schools, whether it was the Pac-10, the Pac-12. You don't need that. You already got a conference that's called the something 12. So we're going to get PacSun to sponsor the Big 12, and they're going to call it the Pac-12. And they're going to
That
be born once again.
now we're talking.
Now we're talking.
Somewhere Bill Walton's smiling, hearing
And
that news.
yeah, exactly. I think
Oh,
imagine the conference of champions being, and hey, so you're gonna have Arizona State, you're gonna have Colorado, you're gonna Utah, you're gonna have Arizona. You're still gonna have a couple Pac-12 schools in there
yeah. There you
that you could
go.
still get your late night, Arizona playing up in Boulder against Colorado, where the ranked teams go to die. You could still have that,
It's
So how
true.
about we get Pac-Sun by the Big 12, which the fact that they're still keen, I saw Roger Sherman tweet out about this. The fact that they'll sell the sponsorship to be called the All-State 12 or All-State Big 12, they'll sell the naming rights to the conference. They won't mess with the fact that there's 16 teams. They're going to
Right.
keep the 12. But I think, how about that? The
So
Pac-12 doesn't
funny.
have to go anywhere. Let's talk to PacSun. I mean, they couldn't even keep a store in the Montgomery Mall. I'm sure they couldn't buy a tenth of a percentage of the Big 12.
No.
But Pacific Sunwear, aka PacSun, to buy the Big 12, and we've already brought back the Pac-12. That's the best. That's the best way we can do
That's the best we can do.
compared to your weak sauce idea with
Listen, I was just trying to rile
Cracker
you up,
Barrel here.
and
Yeah,
it worked. So, I
and
mean,
and
listen, even looking at my desk right now, we could have like the freaking the Big Ten presented by Wawa, right? Got the Wawa mug. We could have the Mac presented by Goldfish. Got the Old Bay Goldfish. This is kind of sick. I'm not gonna lie to you. Could have the NEC presented by Neosporin. You know what I'm
there you
saying? We
go.
could have
Good one.
the Big East presented by Band-Aids. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
possibilities are endless.
yeah, yeah.
They're
I mean,
endless.
maybe Big East decides to go with a full-time sponsor because I know for the tournament, like this year was Jeep. They usually have a sponsor. I think New York Life does the ACC tournament. So I mean, it's all conference
Yeah.
tournaments are already sponsored. So maybe it's about time that conferences get in there. It's
The
all funny.
freaking ACC presented by Avino. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, could do. Yeah, possibilities.
possibilities are endless, Cope.
Just it's what we're gonna see who wants to pony up some money
The
here.
MEAC presented by the Mets.
Never.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Well, maybe the MEAC would just drop to D2 then if they were going to be sponsored by the Mets. Yeah.
Yeah. There you
Anyway.
go. Anyway.
I thought I saw a really good one. Somebody said the A10 should be sponsored by A1. So just
That'd
A10.
be
Yeah.
funny.
So we'll see. I think it can actually get pretty funny as to what this this could become. So
Endless.
moving on, because we could go all day. Because I mean, like the possibilities are endless. We could just start ripping them off all day. We'll get into some player news here. Just some quick transfer updates and other stuff. Lance Ware, Kyle, headed to UT Arlington. The Mavericks headed down there to the WAC. He's going to be playing for KT Turner. So he's moving. I mean, he was in the SEC, he was in the Big East, and now he's headed down to the WAC. Significant drop off in conference here. Although Grand Canyon is there for one more season, Seattle's there for one more season before they join the West Coast Conference. Lance Ware going to be joining a team that's losing two or three of their top leading scorers. I believe DeJuan Gordon is out of eligibility as well, but the leading scorer, Philip Russell, headed to VCU. We'll be talking about him when the time comes. And then Makai Williams going from UT Arlington, moving in conference, Kyle, to Grand Canyon.
Hmm.
Pretty brutal loss there for the Mavericks. So a lot of playing time for Lance Ware, a lot of scoring that's leaving the team. So, I mean, I know he wasn't a scorer at any stop he was at. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for him to play and see the ball here. And then I mean, for KT Turner and UT Arlington, when you get a guy like this to move from such a big conference down, I mean, obviously it's a huge win. I don't think anybody saw that coming, that Lance Ware would even entertain going to a school like that, given the other two schools he's played at. But Lance Ware, moving on, will play his final year at UT Arlington. Shout out to, how about this, Kyle? Some pretty cool news. Sam Hoffman from Temple. He is a Belgium native, and he's going to go back to his home country to kickstart his professional career with the House of Talent Spurs. He'll be playing in the BNXT League that features teams from not only Belgium but the Netherlands as well. Obviously, with overseas and with international professional basketball, there's a limit on the amount of Americans that you can have on your team. They mainly want people that are from that country to play there. There's import taxes and then passport quotas with how many Americans and such. Like I said, but pretty cool there. So shout out to Sam as he embarks on a professional basketball career. Quick coaching news point here, Kyle. St. Joseph's assistant coach John Linehan, he is headed to BYU to join Kevin Young's staff. Kevin Young takes over from Mark Pope, who went to Kentucky in that wild coaching domino effect that we had talked about probably a month or two ago.
Yeah.
But John Linehan, been at St. Joseph since 2022, was at Georgia previous to that, and he's headed to BYU into the Big 12. So pretty late, or I get, early in the pretty late in the offseason, I guess you could say. St. Joe's, they're going to have an assistant slot that they're going to have to fill. So I'm sure we'll be getting some news pretty soon on that. As I'm sure they want to get that nailed down as the summer continues to go on and recruiting is going to take place. But St. Joe's does have a spot open.
Hmm.
Then we'll get into some scheduling news here. Temple was going to play in Uncasville, Connecticut. They were supposed to play Boston College. They would play the winner of Providence or UMass after that. Providence pulls out of this event. Boston College pulls out of this event then. So there's two teams that Temple's going to play. They're going to play Florida State, who's filling in for Boston College, who had just left. And now they're going to play UMass as well. So we're going to get the John Chaney Bowl, the John Chaney, John Calipari Bowl,
Oh yeah.
which I think is pretty cool because it just kind of would have depended on what happened in the Providence UMass game to see who they would have played. But pretty cool that now they're going to have that matchup against UMass, an old school Atlantic 10 matchup. Just announced today and yesterday. We'll get to yesterday. St. Joseph's, Kyle, going to play Virginia Tech at the Palestra. Heisir Miller is going to be coming home to Philadelphia. And really, really good non-conference schedule so far for St. Joe's. We know that they're going to play Charleston in a home-and-home with the return game at Hagan Arena this year after they had played at Charleston last year. They're going to be playing at an MTE at the Barclays Center that features Texas, Texas Tech, and Syracuse. So they're going to get two really good games up there. Obviously, in Big Five play, they are going to have a home game against Villanova. So yeah, quite the non-conference schedule for St. Joe's. I always respect teams that do this. I just saw Maryland put their schedule out. They're playing at Marquette and 8 bye games of like sub 270 opponents or worse. I can't stand teams that do that, Kyle, because you're just
So
finessing the system and the gauntlet that's going to be the Big Ten now that you add Danny Sprinkle in Washington and Dana Altman in Oregon and Mick Cronin and Eric Musselman. Like it's gonna be tough. I don't like teams that do this, that give themselves cupcakes and don't really challenge themselves going into conference play. So really respect what St. Joe's is doing here. They got quite the schedule, and then next year they're going to be playing in the NIL Players Invitational in Vegas. So we'll talk about that when the time comes as well. And then finally, the Penn Quakers, Kyle. I feel like we haven't talked about the Penn Quakers in a while. Came out today. They're going to be going up to Penn State. They're going to be playing in Happy Valley on December 29th. So obviously with smaller schools and Ivy League schools, you play some of these games where you're going to be playing a very good opponent or a Power 5 opponent, but you're going to be, getting probably a nice paycheck in turn. So they, last year it was Houston and Auburn. In the past, they've played at Arkansas. They've played at Missouri. Believe they played at Florida State a couple years ago as well. So this is what Penn does. They play games like this, and this is a challenging game for them as well. But to stay local, hopefully, this is just going to be a bus trip game for them. But they are headed up to Happy Valley. So the schedules are starting to come together for some of these teams. And then finally, last week, Kyle, we found out that the Big Five Classic for the men is going to be played at the Wells Fargo Center, not only this year, but for the next 3 years. And then pretty cool note on the women's side, they're going to be playing their own Big Five Classic, the same exact format as the men, the same pods as the men, as for the women. But the day before, it's going to be Saturday, I believe it's the 7th for the Big Five Men's Classic. And that Friday, the 6th, they are going to be playing at Finneran Pavilion on Villanova's campus. Um, there was a press conference there last week. They'd spoken about how they don't, for the women, they wanted to make sure that they were in a venue where they could maximize attendance and they didn't want the place looking empty. And I think the Finn is a really good spot for that. Really, you were there last year. It really is a beautiful arena to
Yeah.
watch basketball in. Um, can fit a pretty good crowd. So yeah, really excited. I think it's kind of overdue. I mean, it was the Big Five Classic. I think had a good enough turnout and enough fan interest last year that it's about time that they did that for the women as well, and they followed suit, and they have their own kind of neutral site, if you will, event for the Big Five. So, Kyle, with that, before we get to transfer portal news, we do have a coaching point if you'd like to lead us into that.
I would love to. And Cope, speaking of people who or teams that might be playing at Finneran Pavilion next year, Dan Hurley is staying at the University of Connecticut after winning two straight titles. Of course, if you were not in the know, he was recruited by the Los Angeles Lakers. It came out late last week, a Woj bomb, if you will, saying that the Lakers have been courting him all along, that while they had been interviewing the likes of JJ Redick and James Borrego and others, um, Dan Hurley was their guy. So Dan Hurley flew out there, I believe it was last weekend, met with Lakers brass, came back to Stores early this past week and said, I'm staying. Even though it was a 6-year, $70 million offer that he got from the Lakers, he ended up turning it down. And he's going to be staying in Connecticut probably, you know. Now, as a Knicks fan, I've seen some things where people think he might be the heir to Tibbs. Once Tibbs retires, I think that's the one NBA team Dan Hurley would want to go to, being that he's from that area and was a Knicks fan. And that could be something. But for now, he is staying in the college ranks. He's going to try to go for a three-peat. UConn's going to come in as a preseason top 5 team. And obviously, you've seen what they can do under the lineage or the tutelage, excuse me, of Dan Hurley, being that they've won 2 straight tournaments and they've been in a few tournaments and they're not a mediocre team anymore when he took over. We'll definitely say that. But outside of that, it's ginormous for the college basketball landscape in general. Not only because he can put his name in the likes of, you know, Coach K's and John Wooden's if he keeps winning championships at one school. I mean, it's very, very rare that there's people like that. But then also at the same time, for the immediate future, a lot of people probably would have transferred out of UConn if Dan Hurley wasn't the coach anymore. There definitely would have been a lot of ripple effects that potentially could have affected Villanova more than other schools in terms of potential transfers going to them. And obviously being in the same conference as Dan Hurley and UConn, obviously results wise, maybe it wouldn't have been as fruitful for UConn in the future. But regardless, he's staying Cope, and it is a massive move, maybe even the move of the summer outside of Calipari going to Arkansas. So I want to hear your takes about this, the whole saga from being courted by the Lakers, turning down the job, staying in Stores. What do you make of Dan Hurley remaining at UConn?
Yeah, well, I mean, this has been a wild, wild coaching cycle that we'll probably never see the likes of again. And this would have really been the icing on the cake and the cherry on top if it would have happened, because here we are in almost mid-June, pretty much at mid-June, and the whole thing would have started again. Now you have a top job that's open. And now somebody gets poached probably from a Power Five school, unless they hire from within. But those guys, there was talks of Kamani Young going there and leaving UConn to go to the Lakers. I don't even, it's hard to put into words what this would have meant for college basketball, because there would have been so much crazy coach and player movement this late in the cycle and this late this late in the off season. So it would have been wild for college basketball. Now, in terms of Hurley being successful in the NBA, I do think he could have. He's been good everywhere he's been. I saw an interesting point on Twitter. If you follow Mr. Hotballs by chance, or you know who
I
that is,
don't, unfortunately.
UConn, big time UConn fan account. Um,
Great
Said
name.
that the NBA was kind of like the last frontier for the Hurley family. Obviously, his father was a very good high school coach at St. Anthony's in North Jersey. You had Bobby Hurley, who was a terrific college basketball player at Duke. Has had success at Buffalo and still at Arizona State coaching in college. And then obviously Danny's just won 2 championships at the college level. So the NBA is kind of the last frontier because Bobby Hurley got drafted early. He had the car accident where he was not able to, his career was cut short. And we're here saying, what could have been with him. So I thought that was an interesting point that maybe could have lured Dan Hurley out. But at the same time, Kyle, this guy, I feel like he's meant to be the head coach of Connecticut. I don't think there's a job that the coach reflects the program and the fans quite like Dan Hurley. I thought Musselman was kind of close at Arkansas because of how rabid the fan base is and how crazy and how passionate he is. But the passion, the enthusiasm, the history, the tradition of Connecticut basketball, Hurley comes from a basketball family. He's a crazy dude himself, is very animated on the sidelines and loves to get the crowd involved. I think this is such a perfect pairing. And this is where he's meant to be.
Yeah.
The NBA can come calling, and you know what? You can go back to college whenever you want. But if UConn hires one of his assistants or they hire somebody else who's good, you might not be able to go back and be the head coach at Connecticut again. And
No,
I think that might have played a part in it. But this guy is meant to be the head coach at Connecticut. In the Big East, in a basketball conference, in the Northeast, a basketball area, at a basketball school, everything about this is so this pairing between Connecticut and Dan Hurley is so perfect, and he's such a good coach in terms of recruiting and what he looks for and building a program and X's and O's. He's a wizard with everything that he does. His attention to detail. He's got a good thing going here, and I think it would have sucked for a lot of people, including himself, if he would have left to go elsewhere. This is a match made in heaven. He's very successful there, and the way he recruits and picks out his players exactly for what he needs, he can be dominant and will be dominant, Kyle, for a very long time as long as he decides to stay there. He's not going anywhere. And you might give up that chance to stay at Connecticut if you decide to bolt for the Lakers. And then look at all the coach turnover that they have had. Not only with
yeah.
LeBron, but you look at the last 15 to 20 years. It's not a stable job where people stay there a long time. Frank Vogel won a championship. You can say whatever you want. It was Mickey Mouse. It was this. It was that. The man won a title. They chased him out 2 years later. Darvin Ham made the Western Conference Finals last year. They chased him out this year. It's not a stable job. It just isn't. But Connecticut, stable job. If you're going to do a good job, you'll be there as long as you want. And now he's going to be the highest paid coach in college basketball. I get why he entertained it. I think you're almost foolish if you don't with how much money you're throwing at him and the brand and LeBron James.
The Lakers call, you better answer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a premier sports brand. But I'll end with this, Kyle. I saw that day where everything was going down, we were waiting for a decision. I saw a tweet from Mr. Hotballs that really stuck with me. It just said, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Kentucky Wildcats, they're just not UConn.
It's true, especially in the Hurley world. And one more point on, the Lakers and their offer too. 6 or 7 is obviously it's a very, very good offer. It still would not be being paid as much as Monty Williams on the Pistons. Still would be less than him. So the Lakers were saying how they're going to make him this mammoth offer, and it's a very strong offer. We're not going to act like it's not, but he wasn't even going to be paid one of the highest paid coaches in the league, or he'd be up there, but he would be the highest paid coach in the league. So I think the Lakers also probably could have done a better job if they really, really, really wanted their guy. But at the same time, he talked about Hurley's, love for UConn and his love for the area and his love for college basketball. It's hard to go away from that, especially after winning 2 straight titles in the dominant fashion in which they did. There's just so much more to it than just the Lakers and the NBA and, for the next couple of years, LeBron James. UConn's home for him. UConn's home for the Hurleys, or for Dan Hurley at least, but his family. Enough said. UConn is no match, or the Lakers in Kentucky is no match for UConn, and that's the bottom line there. Crazy that that's a world that we live in now. You wouldn't think that probably 15 years ago or so, even though UConn was good 15 years ago. But um, in the last couple of years, especially, he's elevated them to a level in which cannot be touched at the moment. All right, Cope. We're gonna get back into Big Five stuff here. And we're gonna go with Temple Owls. They landed a commitment from Hofstra forward Christian Tomasco. Uh, this was pretty recent. What was this, Wednesday, I think, Tuesday, Wednesday, of this past week. Now, Cope, I'm not gonna act like I know a lot about Tomasco here, so I'm gonna have to have you fill me in here. Obviously, we talked about Temple needing bigger bodies. They're more of a guard-oriented team. They got one here. What is he going to add to this Temple roster for the upcoming year?
Well, the bigger news here is that they also got a commitment from Tulsa for transfer center Muhammad Kita. Believe
Yes.
that was Wednesday. That was also pretty recent this
Yeah.
week. Damasco was a week or two ago, and he's
Okay.
not going to be on scholarship, so he'll be more of a walk on. Um, having seldom played for Speedy Claxton and Pride. But yeah, Muhammad Kita comes in here from Tulsa. Pretty late ad here in the summer as the cupboard starts to get a little more bare with a lot of big names off the board. Temple, I mean, obviously having been very, very busy and getting some real impact players for them next year. But the center position's locked up. It's Elijah Gray's spot until, something happens. So Muhammad Kita here it's a depth plan for now, but he's still a young guy. He had an injury his freshman year at St. John's. He transfers to Tulsa. He appears in 26 games. Um, the numbers are very small because he didn't play a ton in those 26 games. But he's got 3 years of eligibility left. So for now, this is a depth piece. And he's a 7-footer. He's got long arms. This could be a shot blocker, a lob threat that you can develop. So it's depth for now. It's a developmental piece for the future because even with Elijah Gray in there, you don't have somebody with those intangibles that Muhammad Kita has. And something that I harped on a lot with Temple last year is they needed size, they needed some beef, and they needed some strength, some muscle, and some size inside. And hopefully Muhammad Kita can give that to them down the road. But at least for right now, he hasn't shown you anything at the as year at Tulsa that you can really bank on that he's going to provide big minutes off the bench. We don't know that for now. I think this is developmental piece here, pretty late in the cycle, gives them some measurables and some traits that they don't have. But this Elijah Gray spot, he's solely a backup plan for now. But with 3 years of eligibility, you hope he stays in this crazy world of college basketball and that he can be somebody down the line that could flourish into a bench piece or a potential starter.
Yeah. And listen, Adam Fisher, while wanting to obviously compete, definitely also wants to try to develop and plan for the future. And this is definitely one of those projects that could be fruitful for Temple. So definitely a good get there. Speaking of big man Cope and speaking of teams on North Broad, this is kind of surprising. We talked about him a couple episodes ago. Trinity Community College transfer Mohamedou Cisse, committed to Temple, or not Temple, LaSalle, has now decommitted from the Explorers, apparently citing unforeseen circumstances. Definitely very surprising. I don't think we really anticipated that. Obviously, he had just committed a couple weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago at this point. So, Cope, what can you tell me about Mohamedou Cisse and these unforeseen circumstances that have caused him to decommit from LaSalle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what the reason is here. It's just a shame because this is probably something that's administrative related. He had been at St. Louis and then he had transferred down to JUCO level. I don't know, really what that entails, what that looks like, but it's kind of hard to pinpoint a reason why it happened. It sucks for both parties. This was another opportunity for Mohamedou Cisse to get back into the Atlantic 10, where I definitely felt like he could have seen minutes, and played behind or with Demetrius Lilly. And then for LaSalle, when they got Mohamedou Cisse, I said, hey, this is great. They have depth at the center position now. They added Jaleel White and they got Tunde Valberg Fasasi and Deshaun Shepard to return. Like it was going to be a team that had a lot more size that they did last year. And now that you don't have that, now we're back to Ryan Zan pretty much being the backup center, which when you're going to be playing against really big bodies in the Atlantic 10 and some 6'10", 7-footers and athletes that got size and length and stuff, like it's probably not going to work out very well if that's the case. So I'm not really sure if they have a plan to fill this spot with a center if they're going to leave it open because I believe that they were full. Um, it's just unfortunate for everybody. But obviously with Cisse, chance to get back into D1, but for LaSalle, I thought this was a good pickup in terms of depth and them really hammering home something that I thought was a weak point for them last year. So not really sure what to say about the unforeseen circumstances, but unfortunate for both sides here because I did think he was going to be able to play some minutes. Like I said, backing up Demetrius Lilly or, being a 6'11", 7-foot guy, like really being able to give them a big body down there. So unfortunate for all sides, but LaSalle's got a spot open. Will they fill it? We'll see. But they definitely have a need at center now to give some depth to Meech Lilly, who's coming in.
Yeah. And it was a need that we talked about before. So you say committed to the Explorers, like you mentioned, like you need depth in this conference in the A10. There's a lot of athletes, like you said, a lot of big men. No disrespect to Ryan Zan. I just, you know, don't think that that's, like you said, going to work out for them if he is the backup center. So this was, a big commitment depth wise, and unfortunately now it's going the other way where he's no longer going to be part of the program. Um, Hopefully everything's okay with everything. Not that we're going to speculate because we're not at all, but it just stinks that this is putting LaSalle in an interesting spot here at the end, mid-June, when there's not a whole lot of players left on the transfer market. So we'll see how they end up filling this position. Obviously, now they have a scholarship open, so um, whatever options are left, they'll have to explore. But definitely thinning at this point in the summer, even though it's not officially summer, but it's summer. Let's be honest, it's been summer for a few weeks. Um, all right, Cope, we got one more school to go over here. And I know we've talked about this person, I think at least a couple times on the pod in the last month or so. Wooga Poplar finally is a Villanova Wildcat. And listen, we talked about this before. We cannot understate the importance of Wooga Poplar joining the Wildcats, especially after Max Shulga decommits and goes back to VCU. Poplar, obviously, we've mentioned before, from the area, will now be joining another person from the area, or who's been in the area now, Jameer Brickus, coming over from LaSalle. They are going to share a backcourt this year for Villanova. You know, it's looking like a very talented backcourt, even though obviously a lot of these guys haven't played together before. Some of them haven't even played against each other before. But nonetheless, it's someone who has made the Final Four in 2023 with Miami. Really talented guard going into his last year of college. Something that the Wildcats desperately needed going into this year to try to make another run, especially with Eric Dixon coming back for his final year as well. So, Cope, let's talk about Wooga Poplar first. How big is this commitment for Villanova?
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. They had to have it. And I mentioned that the last couple episodes because if you don't get him, if he takes a visit to Oregon, he takes a visit to Arkansas, and he decides to go there, it's like, well, you're not really going to find another impact player like him at this point in the offseason. So to be able to get a Philadelphia native, you bring him home, fills a massive need for a scorer and a playmaker on the wing who can shoot, is a very good vertical athlete. It's massive because if you don't have him, Kyle, I'm looking at this roster and I'm saying, oh God, like this might be a bottom 3-4 team in the Big East. Like that's really the point we were at with all the misses that they had. So absolutely massive to bring him in because with Shulga decommitting, to not have a replacement for him, I mean, really, really would have been a bummer, and you wouldn't have been able to bring in nearly the type of player that Wooga Poplar is at this point. So there was kind of like a last gasp effort here to bring him in. I'm sure he scored a very nice payday for himself to come home as well. But Villanova had to have this one, Kyle, because like I said, if they don't have him, to me, they're almost surefire a team that's going to finish toward the bottom of the Big East. So really big for this, and also for Wooga. He scored a big payday. He's going to be a very vital piece of this offense as well. He's going to have a lot of opportunity to score, and have a lot of responsibility on both ends of the floor, but especially on offense. So I think it's a good situation for him because he'll be able to handle a lot of notes. Some of those teams, you look at that Final Four team and He's playing behind you've Norshad O'Meara on offense. You have Isaiah Wong, Jordan Miller got drafted. Like just a really, really good team where, he goes to a team like Villanova that needs exactly what he brings to the table. He's gonna have a lot on his plate and be able to do a lot on offense and have the ball in his hands a lot. So Villanova needed a guy like this. They're going to bring in a local guy. I think it's a good pairing for both sides. But my God, did Villanova need this Kyle because
Yeah.
the pickings are slim right now, and if you didn't get him and didn't throw everything you have at him, you were going to be in really big trouble.
Yeah, to say the least. And listen, this just raises not only their floor, but their ceiling as well, obviously. Um, Even if they're a middle of the pack team in the Big East, you can still make some noise with that. You can still potentially get into a tournament. If you play well in your conference, obviously non-conference matters too. But this is just something that, like you said, it had to happen and they got it done. So credit to Villanova and company. Listen, they probably threw a bag at him. So credit them for doing that because that's what you need to do in this college landscape. Whether you agree with it or not, has to happen. So good on Poplar, good on Villanova, and excited to see how it all works out this coming season. Cope, that's not the only point guard that committed to Villanova recently, and I am going to try to not butcher this name, but Bulgarian point guard Alexander Gavalyagov, I think I said it right because that's what it looks like, committed to Villanova. Um, I'm not gonna act like I know anything about Mr. Gavalyagov because I don't. Listen, I'm a very, very big college basketball fan. Very, very big Five fan. Obviously, we have this podcast, so I'm very in tune, but I do not keep tabs on Bulgarian point guards. I'm going to be completely honest with you. So, from somebody who's probably one of the only people on the Eastern Seaboard who does, in fact, keep up with Bulgarian point guards, his name's Jake Copestick, and he co-hosts a podcast with me. So, Cope, what can you tell me about Alexander Gavalyagov?
So you're overestimating me a little bit. I am definitely a college basketball sicko, but I don't think that reaches into depths quite like this. I did not know who this guy was before yesterday. I follow international at all. Just kind of hard for me too when I'm watching college. I mean, I don't
A
even
lot
really
going on
keep
over
up with
here, so I don't blame you.
I don't even keep up with the NBA really during college basketball season. So, but definitely had to fire up whatever YouTube highlights I could find and dig into this guy a little bit. So he's a 6'2" point guard, according to Jonathan Gavoni, had a little profile on him yesterday when he had committed. Just graduated from the Global Academy, the NBA Global Academy in Australia. Really good strowing at the Adidas Euro Camp this past week, where I saw some highlights of him on YouTube. So he's going to give Villanova a developmental guy to play behind Jameer Brickus. Obviously, that's who's going to be playing a bulk of the minutes for them. They didn't bring this guy in to not play him, 30, 35 minutes a game or however much. But you bring in a guy like him, can give you maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Saw Aaron Bracey put out today that, he's the young guard that Villanova was looking to have backup Brickus. So he's going to fill a backup point guard need, but also a developmental need as well. He's going to add to this freshman class of Josiah Mosley, who's been playing very well in FIBA, Malcolm Thomas, and then Matthew Hodge from North Jersey as well. So he's going to give a point guard to this freshman class. But Kyle, he shoots the ball well. He's 6'2", obviously very much different from the smaller Jameer Brickus, but he can shoot the ball well and a really nice playmaker as well. I mean, a really, really nice pass who can get into the teeth of the defense, look people off, fool the defense and find guys. So in typical like EuroLeague guard fashion, this is a team player and a very good passer, as most of them are, with the way they play basketball, which is way better than our AAU model here in America.
Oh,
But for now, I think this is definitely a guy that can give you some minutes. Now he's hopping into a very good conference that is probably much different than what he's seen in Bulgaria with the Big East. But we're going to see. Guess what, Kyle? There's a spot for him. He's going to back up Jameer Brickus. He's going to get thrown right in the fire. We're going to see what this guy has. But with his shooting and his playmaking ability, I do think that this is a guy that Nova kind of pulled out of nowhere. I hadn't even heard a rumbling about this guy. Anything.
yeah.
So maybe this was a secret that Villanova, knows how good this guy is and they really want to keep it. And that's why, this didn't leak and didn't get out. But I think this is very quietly a very, very good pickup. They don't usually go the international route, But I think Kyle, I think we'll be looking at this back in a couple years, and we'll say, "Damn, that was a damn good find by the Wildcats," because I think this guy can give you minutes right away in a small role. But down the road, I think this could be a damn good player for Villanova as well. Point guard with some size who could shoot and distribute as well. That we know last year they were very, very sorely missing. So there's more of a long-term play, but a really interesting late, late off-season international move for Villanova that I think in the long run, Kyle, will actually be very, very good.
I sure hope so. I mean, like you said, they haven't really had that uh playmaker, creator like that in a little bit of time. I mean, they've had talented guards, but they haven't had someone like this. If he develops into what it sounds like he can be, as one of those prototypical Euro guards. So interesting little find here by Kyle Neptune and company. Hopefully they can develop him and turn him into something because it sounds like from what you're describing, watching his highlights at the Adidas Euro camp, that he could be a player. So definitely could be an important signing that we could look back on in a couple of years. So we
And
will
his
see.
nickname is Bulgarian Chocolate.
I'm sold. I'm
Yeah,
sold. That's
awesome.
it.
Awesome.
I'm
Love it.
sold. That's incredible.
Yeah, how about that?
Wow. I mean, listen, I wish you would have led with that. That's I would have been much more. I mean, I was convinced anyway. You had some great points about his passing, his shooting, his size, but it's a great nickname. All right. Noah's
Yeah.
back. Anywho, that's pretty much all we got for this silly little episode here, the Big Five Pod. Cope, besides the Bulgarian chocolate, any final thoughts here before we sign off?
Nothing too crazy. Because I feel like I'm still recovering from the quick hitters I did 2 weeks ago and I talked for like 15 minutes straight. But happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there.
Yes.
Happy Father's Day to everybody. Because this episode will probably come out after. So just so we did not forget about you.
Of course.
Happy Father's Day out there. To all the dads. Enjoy maybe watching golf, going to breakfast or brunch somewhere, taking your annual chair nap, in front of the TV. But shout out to all the dads. Happy Father's Day.
Shout out to all the dads indeed. Happy Father's Day. Specifically my father. He's the GOAT and he watches us sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And obviously, Cope, you know him very well too. And even you text us both when the Mets lose, which has been not as often as of late, but often this season. And your dad and your stepdad as well. They're very important people. So shout out to them. Shout out to all the fathers out there. We appreciate you very, very much. And yeah, that's about it. I am going to enjoy some of these Old Bay goldfish. Um, and we're gonna watch some NBA finals, and hopefully by the time that this podcast comes out, the NBA finals are still going on. Um, because that would mean the Celtics would be winning a championship at the night of us recording this, and that would be terrible, to be honest. I hate the Celtics, and I know Cope does too. So with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. As always, make sure you like, subscribe on our YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Big Five Pod. And of course, make sure you listen to our audio only versions on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And with that being said, we're out. We will see you for episode 90.